years and years and years that someone could be on death row, and that's costing the state to keep them in prison. So you were saying about how long someone can sit on death row. There's a man I would have loved to have interviewed on this program, but he was actually too busy to talk to me. And he is from Alabama. He wrote a book. His name is Anthony Ray Hinton, and he was on death row for 30 years waiting to be executed. So that is so disturbing that someone can sit on death row in the kind of conditions you described, the size of the cell, the little bit of recreation per day, the lack of contact with human contact, and live like that for 30 years. But above that, what if they are innocent?
Right, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Now, it's, again, I write fiction, and the protagonist is working with a law firm that is fashioned after the Innocence Project, but I call it something different. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason I took literary license here, really, the reason I did that is because I know for a fact that the Florida Innocence Project does not take death row cases. Am I right?
That is correct.
And my understanding is that they don't take them because these people that are on death row constitutionally get legal assistance. And it does drag on for 30 years, on average. Yeah. Is that right also?
That's correct. The Innocence Project does not get involved because they are entitled to counsel. Yes.
That's right, exactly. That's right. But, for literary purposes, I allow my protagonists to get involved even though they're working for an Innocence Project-like legal firm.
Right. So. Okay. Now, speaking of the Innocence Project of Florida, do you have any connection to them at all?
Well, you are my connection. Yes.
Okay.
And again, I looked into them quite extensively because since I was creating a fictitious legal organization, I structured a lot of what goes on in my books after the Florida Innocence Project, staffed minimally, swamped with petitions for assistance. And if I'm not mistaken, it's something like, what are the numbers, Harriet? Is it like 1,200 petitions per year that they get?
Approximately, at least between 1,000 and 1,200 letters per year.
Yes, and they don't have a lot of money to staff the organization. They depend greatly on students, law students who are doing internships. And one of my characters is an intern with a law firm, so
that's great.
That dovetailed very nice.
Very, very true. The main source of money, the Innocence Project of Florida does get grants from the Florida Bar Foundation and also the Department of Justice. But I think the lion's share of the money that comes in is through fundraising. They've really stepped up events in different parts of Florida, something that we had not done before. And it makes a great deal of sense because if there's no one, or shall I say the other way around, for the longest time, I was the only member of the board of directors here in Sarasota. So the offices are in Tallahassee. And so what we are trying to do is find out where the various board members are in the state and try to have a benefit in those areas. And that does two things, raises awareness and raises money. So we've done two big events here in the last 2 years, I would say, and then they're sprinkled throughout Florida. So I think that's a great way to do it, is to bring in people who get an education. Often our exonerees are present at these benefits, and then, of course, to bring in funds. So that's how we do it. One of the things that I thought you would like to do is to highlight some of the major contributing factors of wrongful conviction that you then fold into your books?
Sure. I've already mentioned snitch testimony, which is becoming less and less of a major issue because the prosecutors and the legal system at large is recognizing that this is really not a trustworthy source of testimony. And that's the one that I used in my first book. The number one issue currently is eyewitness error. This fascinates me, and it's, as from my research, I've learned that it's not uncommon for a white witness to misidentify a black suspect. And so I did incorporate that in my third book, Casperson Beach, where totally, innocently, somebody points to a man in a photo. They call them six packs. So the police will produce 6 photos of individuals that are all similar in looks. And if the person sees that photo and picks it, because often they try to please the policeman, so they'll pick one that looks the most like who they think committed the crime, who they witnessed doing the crime. And the psychologists have found that once you do that, that image fixes in your brain. And it's very hard to shake it, even when it's proved that is not the person who actually committed the crime. And there's a wonderful, wonderful nonfiction book. If I can give a plug for a book.
Oh, that would be great.
I just think so highly. There's a book called Picking Cotton.
Right, one of my favorites.
I know you're the one who first put me onto it. It's just a wonderful book. And it covers, it's a nonfiction, absolute true tale of a man, Mr. Ron Cotton, who was picked to be the perpetrator of a crime. Turns out that he, in fact, wasn't. And it's Jennifer, help me here, Harriet, I should know this right off the top of my head. The author was?
Jennifer Thompson.
That's it, Jennifer Thompson. And at the end of the day, something short of a miracle occurred. The two of them became friends after Ron Cotton was exonerated. So, and I believe that they do a fair number of traveling across the country.
They do.
Speaking on behalf of wrongful convictions and supporting Innocence Project organizations. So, right. So eyewitness error is the number one at this moment. It's the number one reason for wrongful conviction. Others on the list, they're government misconduct.
What do you mean by government misconduct?
Well, oftentimes a prosecutor will be so intent on winning, and I'm not casting aspersions on anybody, but it is proved that this does happen. They become very competitive, and they might cut corners, or they might withhold evidence, or they might twist evidence to try to turn the case in their direction. So that would be an example of government misconduct. There is suppressed evidence, which goes hand in hand sometimes with that. It is the obligation of the prosecutor to submit evidence to the defense counsel. And sometimes papers go missing or the evidence isn't handed over. And I also deal with that in one of my novels. And then there's junk science, quite interesting. Used to be some of the tactics that they used in the past were just bizarre. They would have a dog identifying evidence. A lot of it's been debunked, but junk evidence, junk science, if you will, is still out there. Fortunately, with DNA being more and more accessible, many people who are being exonerated through evidence that has had DNA trace after the fact, after the conviction. Sadly, it takes money to do that. The onus is on the convicted, and if they just don't have the funds or the knowledge or the resources to pursue that, then they just aren't able to prove their innocence until an Innocence Project organization comes along and does it on their behalf.
Right. Well, we are almost out of time for today, but I hope you will come back so we can talk some more about some of these major contributing factors of wrongful conviction that you incorporate in your books and educate our listeners just a little bit more. So, would you be willing to do that?
It would be a pleasure, Harriet.
All
Yes,
right.
thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. We will see you next time on Pursuing Justice and talk some more. And thank you for listening today. We'll
And
see
thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.